Live from the hippest spot online, you've arrived at the Pop Culture Juke Joint, the only weekly podcast you'll need for intelligent showbiz chats. Located just up the street from the Peach Pit and down that dark, damp alley behind Fonzie's garage, you'll find former newsman and current hard-boiled crime writer Anthony Venutolo, chatting with guests about everything from old-school classics to new-school staples. So head up to the bar, grab a drink, and settle in here at the Pop Culture Juke Joint. Now, your host, Anthony Venutolo.
Welcome to another episode of the Pop Culture Juke Joint, where each week we take a deep dive into one particular topic of pop culture, be it movies, TV, books, music, comics, media, you name it. This episode, co-host Jack Lugo and I are super excited. We've been talking all week about the unseen, never released director's cut workprint of Rocky V. Okay, I know what everyone's thinking. Rocky V, it was awful. Yes, it was the way it was released. Jack and I have managed to get our hands on the workprint, edited by original Rocky director John G. Avildsen. And let me tell you, it is a completely different film. It is a completely different film. The film has heart. It feels like a Rocky movie. It's ridiculously different. Jack and I will dissect it. And we will also talk about the film, I should say the documentary, King of the Underdogs, which really is about Rocky director John G. Avildsen and all the other movies he directed, Karate Kid, Lean on Me. Are you suspecting a theme here? Underdog. All right, let's get right into it. And you know what? It's going to be a great episode. So sit back, relax, grab that drink, enter the juke joint. I'm going to tell you about the first time I saw Rocky, and then I want to know your first time. But I was doing the math on this. I must have been about, 8 or 9 years old. Okay, I don't really remember many movies really before that, really, but I do remember going to the movies with my mother and my aunt. We went to a theater in Montclair, New Jersey, called the Claridge, and I remember sitting there and watching Rocky. I remember sitting there watching Rocky. I don't really remember much of the film, but I remember the fight, and I remember watching the fight, and I remember loving the movie. And I also remember not knowing whether he won or lost.
Yeah.
When I was a kid.
Yeah, I think growing up, I do had that kind of confusion. I always assumed Rocky won every fight that he fought, and of course, when you're a kid, the thing that you focus on is the fight. And obviously, that first Rocky movie is so much more. It isn't really. I mean, people call it a boxing movie, but it's more. It's a romance movie.
It really is. It really is a romance movie, and I tell people that all the time. I tell people, I say, it's a romance with the backdrop of boxing. That's kind of like the theme of really not all of them, but really a lot of them. And I mean that relationship was so strong. Yeah, that you feel it all through Rocky Balboa and to a certain extent Creed. That character was. Before we even get into that, I want to know about the first time you saw Rocky.
Okay, the first time I saw Rocky, it was, I think, at my uncle's apartment. They had an apartment with my grandparents, and my uncle had, I think, the upstairs apartment. And he had what I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to know this, but it's called a capacitance electronic disc player, and the movies would come in this huge plastic disc.
Yes,
and
I remember those.
You would slide it in, and you would slide it out. Yes.
Yeah, I used to salivate and want one of those every time I went to Sam Goody's. Yeah. They used to have them, and it was almost like this is like DVDs before the even concept of DVDs existed.
Yeah, I think Laserdisc were around at that time, but this was kind of like in between. It was kind of like it was before. I mean, VHS players were around, but they weren't as widespread as they became during the 80s. So I mean, this was like maybe the early 80s. I mean, my uncle had probably either the first Rocky movie or the second Rocky movie. I always get confused as to which one I saw first. But he put it on, and I was entranced from the moment it began. I mean, there are two film franchises that I'm passionate about, and you know this. I mean, I'm passionate about James Bond, but I got into James Bond as I got older. But I'm also very, very passionate about Rocky, and Rocky is a film franchise that I've loved, probably since I was maybe 4 years old. I mean, I think I was probably that young when I first saw it.
Growing up, my walls were covered with Rocky posters. Anyone that knows me, and when they came to my house as a kid and, all through high school and into college, Aunt had posters of every Rocky movie in his room, even Rocky V.
Even Rocky V,
Rocky V.
What we're going to get to. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What, before we found this work print that we're going to be discussing, what was your impression of Rocky V? What were your thoughts about Rocky V?
Man, I have this kind of like love-hate relationship with Rocky V. Only because it's a Rocky movie, I feel like I have to kind of like parts of it. And I do. I kind of like parts of Rocky V. But when that movie came out, the fan in me was so stoked, and when I left, I felt that like it was rushed or something, and I knew that couldn't have been the case, but it just didn't feel complete. It didn't feel like a Rocky movie to me. It felt like just like a typical 90s Hollywood crap-filled movie. That's really how I felt.
I think that's how most people feel.
To
this day, because most people don't know about this work print.
Right. And I knew somewhere along the line, like watching it, and I think when that came out, I think it was in college. All right. So yeah, I know exactly where I saw it, and I knew who I saw it with, and it came out Thanksgiving. It came out Thanksgiving weekend, and a lot of people don't remember that this was supposed to be the big movie of the weekend. This was supposed to dominate the weekend, and it did not dominate. It didn't dominate because of two things. It didn't dominate because of poor reviews, and it didn't dominate because of another movie that came out the same weekend. Do you have any idea what that movie was?
Well, because I kind of did some research. I believe it was. I believe it's Home Alone.
Oh, Jack. Yes, it was Home Alone.
Yeah.
And no one expected this little movie, this little kiddie movie, to be the holiday blockbuster that it was.
Yeah, and they both films kind of feature holidays. I mean, obviously Rocky takes place over a longer period of time, but there's a holiday scene in Rocky as well.
Sure.
And then obviously Home Alone is a big holiday film where the whole film takes place in the holidays.
And boy, Jack, that and that was a different time when movies had really thrived by word of mouth. There wasn't really no social media at the time. So if a movie had legs, it was because people went and enjoyed it. And boy, let me tell you something. Yeah. It was Home Alone from Thanksgiving all through the New Year, and I think Rocky V suffered greatly because of that movie.
Definitely.
And even to this day, when it's on in marathons, I do a little sigh when I turn it on and it's on Rocky V. And like the Rocky fan in me just kind of like labors through it.
Yeah.
But now I think, like you said the other day, now that this work print exists for me and for you, this is the one that I might just pop on when I'm in the mood.
I think so. I mean,
but wait, before we get into it, let's just explain this whole thing. All right. Originally, this episode really was going to solely concentrate on the documentary King of the Underdogs.
Yes.
Which is about John G. Avildsen, Rocky director, Rocky 5 director, Karate Kid, Lean on Me, and a couple others that are kind of odd for him. Anyway, so we were going to be talking about that, and like the more you watched it first, and we're going to get into the documentary, but you watched it first, and I think you might have sent me a message or two about alternate takes of in Rocky 5. I always knew there were deleted scenes.
Yeah. I always knew there were deleted scenes too, and I think I might have seen one or two on like YouTube and stuff. But then the director of this documentary, Derek Wayne Johnson, he did this interview with. Most people know him as the AVGN video game nerd James Rolfe. He did an interview with him, and and a very small part of the interview he actually says, "Oh, there's this work print that is fantastic, that is far superior to the theatrical release, and that basically John G. Avildsen, signed up to do a different movie, and the studios forced him to change it, and they forced obviously Sylvester Stallone to change what they had in mind as well." I think. What it is that a lot of times these movie studios kind of, they presume to know more than the creative people, what it takes to make a great movie. And they don't really have any real understanding for the material. And they kind of, they meddle until what's left is really, feels very contrived and very forced and feels like it was put together like that theatrical cut that we've all kind of grown used to. It feels very cartoonish, like you said. It feels like it's very like forced like upon the audience to kind of accept this kind of new version of Rocky that doesn't really go fit very well with what came before. It
was awful, and it was filled with a lot of triggers.
Exactly, yeah.
These little triggers that are inserted. Let's say maybe during the final fight, where you see young Robert saying, "Knock him out! The bum took my room."
Yeah, he
like
took
that
my
kind
room.
of that kind of crap.
Yeah.
Okay, was not in the work print, and so all right. So we both went kind of searching on YouTube for whatever we can find regarding this work print, and I came across this really great video essay by some guy named Matt Brando, who has his own podcast. Props to Matt Brando for making this great video essay. And he kind of like laid out the film bit by bit. He went through almost all the scenes. He compared the two. So that was like a primer for me. Right. So from there, I think I had found, a couple of chapters on Daily Motion. It was really bad quality. And I will say this. The work print is awful quality, but it is watchable. Jack was fortunate and kind enough to do some intrepid journalistic work, and he managed to find an entire copy, which we both watched. And let me say, wow,
it's night and day.
From the beginning to the end. Let me just say that again. From the beginning to the end, the movie is completely different. Now, I made I told you I was going to make a list of 5 things that I found notable. I don't know if you did that, but I did that.
I did, and I figured I'd just kind of go with the flow and kind of, react to what you came up with.
Okay, so I'm going to dive right in. And here's my 5. Now, they can be specific things or scenes or just very broad in general. But I will say this. One thing because I've watched Rocky 5 a million times. I will say, as much as I didn't like it, I watched it a million times.
Oh yeah, same here. Actually, when I first met my wife, when she hadn't seen all the Rocky movies, so when we got to Rocky 5, I was like, this one kind of sucks. But we have to watch it anyway. And she actually ended up liking it. She liked it better than Rocky 4 because I guess she connected better with like the whole theme of the father and son,
of course,
stuff. And but I was like, well. Yeah, this kind of sucks.
I will say this: there's 2 press conferences in Rocky 5.
Yeah.
And being in the news biz, or I was in the news biz, I always felt that they just fell flat. Okay, they were just the worst press conferences on the planet, real or movie or otherwise.
Yeah.
But in the Workprint, the press conferences are different. The questions are different. The questions are more realistic. Okay. In the theatrical version, Rocky wants to talk about the plane ride over.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and in this print, or the Workprint, I should say, the questions are a little bit more realistic. For example, at the end, when after Tommy Gunn wins the championship, one of the reporters asks why they dumped Rocky. That didn't make it into the theatrical cut.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that. Yeah, as I was watching this, there were a few like subtle things. Like I know the major differences because we will definitely get to those, but there are a few subtle things that like I was like, was that quite the same? And I almost didn't want to go back and rewatch the theatrical because it's like I felt like it will just taint the whole experience.
Well, for example, in that final press conference when that weird redheaded character, Tommy's girlfriend, when the reporter goes, "Hey, Tommy, I have an idea for your next opponent. Why don't you fight the redhead in the front row? I hear she comes real cheap." That was not in the Workprint.
Wow.
Okay? So, like little things like that, I feel were shoehorned into the theatrical cut to make it either funnier, to make it, I don't know, more biting. I don't know. Like it just baffles me.
I mean,
baffles me.
My theory is this: that this Workprint, and I don't know for sure because I've done a little research, but the only a few people I think know the whole story, and I'm not one of them. But here's my theory. My theory is that this was the Workprint was probably put together by John G. Avildsen and the editors and Sly, and this was the film. This was a version of the film that they probably showed to test audiences. And test audiences probably said, this is supposed to be a Rocky film, and it's sad, it's somber, it's too serious. Why don't you this needs to be lightened up. I want to, go to a Rocky film and not, I want to escape when I go see a Rocky film. I don't want to have to think and feel and have all these kind of like, somber feelings and stuff. And I think that's probably generally, I'm paraphrasing as obviously, but that's probably what happened. And then, the studio probably reacted and said, look, this is going to be a turkey, you need to, fix this and make it so that it's lighter and, that audiences can have a little bit more fun watching it. But it completely, does a disservice to the material because, I mean, if you think about it, originally, I mean, they already meddled when they told Sylvester Stallone, listen, you can't kill Rocky.
Right.
And this was United Artists. At the time, I think it was United Artists, and then MGM ended up buying United Artists.
Wait.
It ended up getting swallowed up by it. So currently it's MGM that holds the rights, but back then I think it was United Artists. And so, so they said, okay, you can't kill Rocky, so right away, and this was like right before production, or even maybe they started production. It's unclear because there's some conflicting information. Like if you look into the YouTube, the Wikipedia page and stuff, according to that, they made the change of not killing Rocky like after they started filming.
Right.
And there are some sources that say that they changed it before, so I'm not entirely sure. The studio kind of, already kind of changed what the film was. Right. And took it away from the people who knew the material the best. I mean, Sylvester Stallone created the character. He won the Academy Award for writing it, I believe, the first Rocky.
Yeah.
And John G. Avildsen won the Academy Award for directing the film. The first film won Best Picture. They knew what they were doing. And John G. Avildsen, as we'll get to when we talk about the documentary, he knew how to tell the underdog story, and it's in its own way. Like each of the Rocky sequels were kind of underdogs, like a different take on the underdog story. So they both knew what they were doing. I mean, people don't give Sylvester Stallone enough credit for, being the creative person, that he is, and knowing his own material. And I think that's probably what happened. I mean, I obviously I can't say for sure, but that's my speculation.
Yeah, I mean, and let's also not forget that, Sly was probably at the time maybe one of the top 2 or 3 movie stars in the world at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. And the studio may have come to him and say, look, on the side. Now, this is my speculation. He goes, Sly, we dig the movie, but there's a lot of, we have problems with it. We need you to go back and rework it with John or whatever. And, Sly's going to placate these studio heads, okay? This is a guy who's at the top of his game, and I think John G. Avildsen, I don't know, unfortunately might have been kind of on the downslope of his career.
Oh, yeah, I think he was coming off of Rocky. I was coming off of Karate Kid 3.
Right.
Right after, and he went from doing Karate Kid 3 to Rocky 5.
Exactly. And I think Sly might have been caught between a rock and a hard place. And I think a lot of concessions had to be made. He had to placate the studio heads. He had to deal with the fallout of maybe wanting to kill Rocky. And now he had to deal with John G. Avildsen. I think there was a lot going on, and some bargaining had to be made. And I think what we wound up with was that mess. Okay?
Yeah.
But, all right, let me get to my number 2 of what I really thought was noteworthy about this work print.
Okay.
The music. The music. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't say enough about Bill Conti. I mean, the first Rocky film, I mean, it would have been a completely different film if you had different music. I mean, imagine all those sequences without that Bill Conti score. And obviously, you do hear some Bill Conti score in the original, in the theatrical cut of Rocky V, but they obviously, felt the need to kind of crowbar in these, the hip hop 90s rap music, which obviously I don't have anything against, and neither do you, but it doesn't fit the Rocky
it doesn't.
character.
It doesn't fit the Rocky character.
Yeah.
It feels awfully dated by this point. It just sounds dated. I mean, like rap, early 90s rap sounds like early 90s rap. It sounds dated as hell. It didn't fit the vibe of the characters. Okay? It may have worked in Creed because Adonis Creed probably maybe would have been into it, but Rocky's not listening to rap. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
It just felt odd. So instead, in the work print, we got the training montage music from Rocky IV, composed by Vince DiCola.
Right. Yes.
And a couple, and then there were 2 training sequences, and the first training sequence was silent. Like, you didn't really hear music; it was just dramatic.
Yeah,
okay?
and it was more effective. And in the theatrical, that's when you hear the "Go for It,"
right?
Like the early '90s rap song,
right?
"Go for It," and it works better with the silence because it contrasts. It makes Robert into like a more sympathetic character. Because,
it really does.
Yeah, in the theatrical, he's very whiny and bratty, and in this one, you kind of feel for him because you really get the sense that he's being neglected by Rocky. He wants. Not just Rocky's attention, but he wants, Rocky to share what he knows with him. Rocky is instead, going into, having this bond with Tommy, and Tommy, doesn't really, appreciate it the way we find that out later, obviously, but in that moment in time, Tommy is, you could tell he's sort of even taking advantage back then. I mean, before we know that he's going to betray Rocky.
It really is true because, at heart, this is a family movie about fathers and sons, and when Rocky is arguing with Robert in the basement, towards the end of the movie, and he said, "Tommy needed my help," and when Robert said, "So did I," you really felt it then because the kid needed his father's help in defending himself from those bullies, and you feel it better. It comes out more in the work print.
Definitely.
So that's okay.
Yeah, and then that sequence leading up to the bully fight with Robert, not having the music there, just sort of, and when you get to the fight, I don't know, it's more effective. It feels like it belongs. That music it just, when you're watching the theatrical version, it's just, it makes it feel like a music video,
It really does.
It takes you out of the movie, and even though it's not a terrible song, for back then, it's just,
right.
It makes it just sort of makes you, it takes away that suspension of disbelief that's so important when you watch a film like this.
Exactly. My number 3, the third thing I was really taken by with this Workprint was that almost all of the scenes, I'm going to say that almost all of the scenes, they used alternate takes of dialogue. Like literally, like complete scenes were completely different.
Yeah.
And it's noticeable in 2 particular settings. Outside of the pet shop.
Okay, yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah. Outside of the pet shop, when Rocky finds out Adrian is working at the pet shop, and he's like, I got to do this, but why do you have to do it? And then, George Washington Duke comes, and he's trying to get Rocky to fight again. It's completely different. I mean, it's the same scene, but the takes they use are completely different. And they all seem more realistic. They seem more conversational to me. Okay? And the same thing with outside of Paulie's house after Tommy speeds away on Christmas Eve and he's fighting with Adrian.
Yeah.
And he tells her that I just want my family to have the best. And she's like, I have the best.
I have the best. I wasn't sure if that line was in the theatrical. I don't think it was.
It was not.
Okay.
It was not. So little things like that just make these scenes more complete.
Yeah, and more compelling. I mean, why would you cut something like that out? It gets to the emotional core of what's going on in that scene. It sort of, it lets the audience, feel like these are real people and not just like cartoons.
Exactly. Now, my number 4 is kind of like an offshoot of my number 3, but
yeah.
When Rocky is in his lawyer's office or his accountant's office or whoever the hell that guy was in the beginning who's telling him that he was broke,
yeah,
it got to the point where Rocky was yelling at Paulie for completely screwing this up.
Yeah.
And the money. And he was blaming Paulie.
Yeah, Paulie, I think, makes a comment to Adrian,
right,
because, according to him, she was the one who, I guess, picked out the accountant.
Right,
that ended
right,
up ripping
right. He was like, why are you blaming her when this is your... But see, we never really got... Paulie's an asshole.
Yeah.
Okay? He was always an asshole. He's like a dick in every single movie. Okay? And we always wonder why Rocky keeps him around.
Yeah.
Okay? So when he finally unloads on Paulie in the lawyer's office, I felt good. I was like, yes.
We needed that. We definitely needed that. Because, for years, not knowing about this Workprint, I was like, well, Rocky kind of forgives Paulie, right away. There's no, confrontation between the two of them. No, I'm here, I'm back in this old neighborhood because of you. None of that.
Right. Right.
You would think, there would at least be something. I mean, I know, Paulie's his brother-in-law. He feels some kind of, he feels loyalty. Obviously, Rocky's a very loyal person. But you would think there would be something more there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw the deleted scenes of Rocky Balboa. If you haven't, you should check them out because there's a bunch of Paulie, Rocky deleted scenes in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I might have seen them a long time ago.
Yeah.
I know I've had the movie on DVD and Blu-ray for a while.
And again, it kind of fleshes out their relationship. All right, so my number 5 is probably one of your main points as well.
Yeah.
But that end fight was far greater in every conceivable manner than what we were given in the theatrical print.
a lot more believable. I think the fight is choreographed well in both versions, because obviously it's the same same person doing the choreography. I think it was Randy Couture.
Right.
So I mean, it's not to say that the choreography itself was bad in the theatrical, because it was okay, but the pacing and the timing and the music and the lack of like intercut scenes with Robert saying he stole my room and Duke kind of like going, oh no, you're losing it, whatever.
Yeah, you lose it, you're finished.
Yeah, exactly. All those, and also that whole the whole thing about Duke tells Tommy, don't fight a street fighter fight, you're a prize fighter, blah blah blah.
Right,
blah.
right.
That whole thing is
none of that
not in the Workprint, which makes sense because like why would you? Because Tommy, you're assuming that Tommy never had like a real fight, and he says he grew up in Oklahoma. He had a past with his father. You would assume that he's been in real fights,
right?
Not like professional fights. So to have that whole dialogue of like, well, Tommy can't fight a street fight, that sort of takes away from the effectiveness of that fight scene, because then Rocky has the advantage right away.
Exactly, and all of the corny stuff like that is out. This is it feels much more guttural. The music itself is the old school Bill Conti music.
Yeah.
The scene with Mickey is completely different.
Completely, and it works so much better. I mean, I know some people might prefer the cut scenes with Mickey, which I guess were filmed later, because I think, like I said, what happened was they showed this Workprint to a test audience, and they said, this is not working. So they went back and reshot a lot of it, and at least the Burgess Meredith stuff, and those were shot, I think, after production or whatever.
I always felt that the Mickey that we got in the theatrical cut seemed kind of corny.
Yeah.
Not
really true to the character. I mean, because you see him, mostly in the first two movies, he's very down to earth. He's not this character who's like, I don't know. You're not going to get that like, saccharine kind of moment from him that you get in the theatrical.
Exactly. And I will say this: that one part of the fight in the theatrical print where Tommy runs Rocky through the alley, through the gate, and then into the street.
Yeah.
That was not in the Workprint.
That was not in the Workprint. Because the fight kind of takes place in two settings. Like, obviously, they have the scene in the bar where he punches out Mickey. I mean, punches out Paulie, and Rocky goes, you knocked him down. Why don't you try knocking me down now? And then my ring's outside. And even the scenes that are the same in the two versions. Like when I was watching the Workprint and I saw Rocky say, my ring's outside, I really felt chills. Like I really felt like, wow, that was a powerful moment. And never felt that before.
And I will say this, dude. In the beginning of that fight, leading up to Tommy sucker punching Rocky, which I loved, by the way, Rocky gets angry at the crowd, because the crowd is egging them on. And he goes, what do you want to see, a dog fight? Is that what you want? You want a dog fight? He was getting angry at them for making him fight Tommy.
Yeah,
and he was
they don't understand. Like they don't understand what their relationship was. The whole mentor thing that was going on between the two of them. They just wanted to see a fight. They didn't really care. What the relationship, what the sacrifice, what was being lost with this. With their deterioration of their relationship. You get that. That's a very Rocky moment. Rocky, he's a very noble person. He's a
noble person. He kept asking Tommy to call the fight. Remember, in the Workprint, he grabs Tommy by the hair, which he did not do in the theatrical cut. Yeah, and he's like, call it.
Yeah, he desperately wants the fight to be over. Right. He doesn't want to beat Tommy up, Right. Where I think in the theatrical, the way it's cut, it makes it look like Rocky's having fun fighting because of the music, I think.
Yes.
It wasn't fun. And that's not what this film's about. This film isn't about conveying this whole idea of fighting being fun. He was forced to fight, and the whole idea of Rocky enjoying having to fight Tommy, that just doesn't mesh with the rest of the film that we got.
Well, and plus that the music they used in the theatrical cut was the hip-hop version that sampled Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah.
Okay? And it didn't work. It did not work. I wish everyone can go and watch that Workprint, because let me tell you, it will elevate your opinion of this movie.
Yeah, at the very least, fine, because I think that fight scene is on YouTube. I mean, unless someone takes it down or whatever. That's because that's the first time I saw it. But it works so much better when you watch the whole thing put together. But I remember seeing that work. I think that was one of the first things I found on YouTube. And there are also more other scenes I found too. But yeah, that fight, man. I mean, that at the end of that fight, you really feel like you've watched a Rocky movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. This Workprint makes Rocky V feel like a Rocky movie.
Yeah.
Okay, because you know what? We didn't even talk about it, but we see there's a lot more action in Andy's bar.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot more action in Andy's bar, and we get to see Little Marie.
Yes, we get to see Rocky drunk and intoxicated. Which, I mean, you in the flashback scene where he's in Mickey's gym having the flashback, you get the sense that maybe he's not all there, but you didn't see him drinking, and you get the.
It makes sense now that he goes there. He's a little buzzed. He's a little drunk. He hallucinates a little bit, pretending that maybe is Mickey there? Is it a flashback? What's going on? It makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and you get the whole idea of the whole sense of like when he tells this like ridiculous pancake story to the bar crowd in the Workprint, which is hilarious, and the bar people they're kind of like egging him on, but at the same time you could tell they're judging him, and then by the end of the scene he knows that they're kind of looking down on him and patronizing him to a certain extent. And you feel like, wow, not only did he lose the money and all that stuff, but he's lost a certain amount of respect, and maybe it's costing him a certain amount of self-respect at the same time.
Yeah,
I mean, these are themes that are like. Yeah, I mean, they're so heavy and so important to this Rocky character arc that like you never got that sense in the theatrical.
It was all lost in the theatrical cut, all of it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this is a good segue because, let's chat a little bit about this documentary because, I got to be honest, I knew who John G. Avildsen was. I mean, I envisioned him as this like a journeyman director for hire. I never really dissected the movies, and when you do, you realize this guy did have a running theme of underdog throughout his entire career.
These kind of like people think of them as formulaic films, but in a sense, like to master that is like he was a true craftsman. Like he knew how to tell these stories in a way that captured audiences and made people sort of feel that kind of feeling of exhilaration. At the end of the movie when the hero presumably wins. You see that in the first Rocky. You see that in the Karate Kid. You get that kind of rush from watching. And I mean, this might just be because I've watched them since I was a kid and I grew up on these movies. But I think these are films that kind of last throughout the generations. I mean, people look back on these films and and you introduce them to your kids. I mean, I know I had my son watched the Rocky movies and he watched the Karate Kid movies. They never grow old, and like people, I don't think he gets enough credit for that.
No, he doesn't. And we are speaking about the documentary King of the Underdogs.
Yes.
And go ahead.
Oh yes, and I think the company to put it out is owned by Corolla Chassis Media. and it's out on iTunes too. I mean,
Awesome.
it's worth checking out. I mean, obviously a lot of the focus is on Rocky. You find out when in regards to Rocky about that round 14 where those, which I didn't know before, the way those final punches of the fight were thrown, were put in the film. It was really 2 punches that were made to look like 4.
Yeah.
Those final punches of that round. I didn't know that. Basically it was a close up of the 2 punches, and then he cuts to the wide shot of the same 2 punches, and it makes it look more effective. It looks like Rocky's really injured Paulie Creed's ribs at the end of that fight, and if maybe he had a couple more seconds, maybe Apollo would have went down. You really get that sense. Whereas if it was just the 2 punches, maybe you wouldn't feel that.
It was real guerrilla filmmaking, man. Let me tell you. And you find out these great stories on why Rocky's corner men's sweaters were pink. Yeah. They were pink. They were pink because they screwed up the laundry.
The laundry, yeah. The dye, I think, in the letters ran. The letters I think were supposed to be red, and the red dye ran in the laundry. So it was. Incredible. I mean, some of these stories I kind of knew already because especially the ice skating rink scene with Rocky and Adrian. Well, for anyone who doesn't know, that whole scene was supposed to take place in a restaurant. And, John G. Avildsen said, that's kind of boring. Let's have them go ice skating. But the problem was they couldn't afford the extras, especially when you have to pay union. The extras have to be in the union. So, they came up with the idea of, what if the ice rink is closed? And, Rocky, arranges for them to have the rink for a limited amount of time. You can't imagine that scene any other way.
No, that was a perfect touch. It was a perfect touch because it was Thanksgiving. What skating rink would be open on Thanksgiving?
Exactly.
It was just a perfect touch. Touch.
And that scene kind of seals you get the sense that those 2 characters are connected, that they're bonded.
You get the sense that they're connected, and you also get the sense that they're loners because it is Thanksgiving and they're not with anybody.
Right.
And they're together on Thanksgiving, and while the rest of the world is, conceivably, with their families. This was a great documentary because everyone was in it. I mean, Stallone was in it, Carl Weathers was in it, Talia Shire was in it,
Burt
Young, Ralph Macchio, by the way, was in it. I met him, by the way. I think I mentioned that to you.
I was wondering because I think he started to tell me that.
Oh, man. I met him at Chiller Theater. That's the local, horror, pop culture show. They do it twice a year here in Jersey. It's pretty huge. And, he's at the table. And, he's signing autographs, and he's got all his photos in front of him. By the way, he's got the worst signature on the planet. like even the signature was almost angry. And, he didn't have the Danielson picture. We all wanted the Danielson picture. Okay.
What picture did he have?
He had some freaking headshot. Okay, and then he had the Johnny from The Outsiders, Stay Gold, and then he had what I swear to God looked like a headshot from that movie he made with Artie Lang, that baseball movie.
Oh, okay, Beer League.
Yeah, Beer League. We wanted the Karate Kid picture, dude. I mean, he didn't have it. He just, it just seemed a little aggravated that everybody kept asking for the Karate Kid picture. I don't know. He just seemed like he was in a bad, he was in a piss poor mood that day, and he just didn't want to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
But back to the documentary, you really learned a lot about how John G. Avildsen thought. And I did notice, and someone did say he always had a camera in his hand. He had his iPhone out constantly shooting at all these press events. And it's a shame that it came to him not really working anymore. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last film he did was with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he tried to get his name taken off. And I think a lot of it was probably due to a lot of interference. People, if your last film didn't make enough money, you don't get the kind of carte blanche that you would if you had a string of successful hits.
It's a shame. The guy won an Oscar, for God's sakes.
Yeah, and he knew what he was doing. He knew how to tell that underdog story. I mean, better than anyone. You see that. I mean, and also on the Karate Kid side of things, how that final scene was shot, and at the end of the first Karate Kid, how he actually personally paid to go back and reshoot that scene to get the close up of Mr. Miyagi.
That made it. For me, to this day, when I see that shot of him proudly smiling in freeze frame, it kills me every time.
Yeah.
Kills me every time.
I mean, what's that film without that scene? I mean, you kind of, you would feel kind of unfulfilled without having that one little connector, because obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, the scene that starts off the second Karate Kid movie was supposed to end the first one, but they never filmed it when they filmed the first film because they felt like the film could end at the end of the tournament. And you didn't need to have a parking lot scene at the end,
right?
And so when they did the first one, they didn't have that last scene with Daniel and Mr. Miyagi together. And going back and reshooting that with Pat Morita and having that one, it lasts for a few seconds, and it makes the film feel completed. You feel like if it didn't have that scene, you wouldn't feel like you've seen a complete film.
That was a really special movie for me growing up. I was in high school, and Daniel LaRusso, he was like from New Jersey, so I kind of identified with that. He was from Newark, which is like in my neck of the woods. Yeah. And, he moves to California. And, it looked like to me like a different way of life out in California, man. Everyone was riding like motorcycles and they were on the beach, and then he meets Elizabeth Shue. And I'm like, wow, it must be great to be out in California. I was never out in California, Yeah. So like, I really kind of connected with that movie. I really, really did. So, you really feel when, Daniel gets brutalized by this gang. You're really pulling for this kid. And, the movie worked on so many different levels. And as an aside, let me just say, I don't know how you feel, but I really am kind of excited for this new Karate Kid series coming up on YouTube.
I have mixed feelings about it because, we'll get back to Rocky in a second, right. But with Rocky, I feel like if with the Rocky Drago thing, I think that makes more sense. Whereas with the Daniel and Johnny rivalry, I feel like it was concluded. I mean, because like all of Kreese's students left him. You find out at the beginning of Karate Kid 3, and it just. The idea that Johnny would go back and try to reform the Cobra Kai and maybe take, kind of revisit what Kreese, the evil karate instructor was doing in the first Karate Kid. It just feels like, I don't know. It feels like it could be kind of forced, but it could be interesting. I could be completely wrong.
If they pull a Creed or a Rocky Balboa where they really go back to basics and make it as kind of realistic as possible, maybe Daniel's dealing with, the loss of Mr. Miyagi, not dealing with it, but it's some years later. And, I'm sure he's just kind of moved on with his life and looks fondly back at that time. And, what if Johnny is kind of like down on his luck and, he's got a family to feed, and what's the only thing he knows but maybe karate? I don't know, man. Maybe this could be good. Who knows?
It could be good. I mean, I guess I'm hesitant because you feel like you've concluded that story, and especially the way the first Karate Kid ends with Johnny hands him over the trophy and says, you're all right, Daniel, and not that they become best friends afterwards, but you get the sense that the rivalry is over.
Was over.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I like I told you, I don't need another streaming service to subscribe to, but I think I might have to subscribe to YouTube Red.
I might have to just check out maybe the first one just to see what's going on there. But I think before we go, we should kind of discuss what the future, what we think the future should be, or what we see in the future for Rocky, because obviously, Sylvester Stallone didn't write Creed. It was written by Ryan Coogler, and Michael B. Jordan starred in it, and that was the team that made Fruitvale Station, now we've learned that Sylvester Stallone's writing Creed 2. And, in the news recently, we found out that, he plans to have Dolph Lundgren, reprise the role of Ivan Drago. I think a lot of people were speculating that we might get Creed's son versus Drago's son, which is a possibility. But recently on TMZ, they interviewed him, and he kind of said, at least said or implied, that there would be some kind of fight between Rocky and Drago. What do you think of that?
I think Sly's being very coy. I think he is in a master stroke manipulating the TMZ paparazzi photographer for that exact headline, because he knew what would come out of that. He said it wouldn't be a Rocky movie if I don't hit Drago or something like that. So everybody runs away with it, assuming that they're going to, quote, fight again. I think you're right. I think there is going to be some sort of altercation.
I think so too, yeah.
Okay, I think the altercation may provoke a fight between Creed's son and Drago's son. Okay, but I don't think Rocky's going to get back into the ring.
Oh, I don't think so either.
There's no way, shape, or form. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Rocky bite the big one in this one.
I think we might see something similar to what happened with Mickey when Clubber Lang kind of shoved Mickey, and that caused, preempted like a heart attack with Mickey, and Mickey passed away. We might see, Rocky kind of, die as a result of his altercation with Drago, or we also know that he's also recovering from cancer.
Right.
That might come back as well. I don't know. How do you feel about the whole idea of Rocky dying?
I don't want Rocky to die.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
And I know I'm just being selfish, and the character is like 70 years old or whatever he is now, and, life is life and blah, blah, blah. But as long as Sylvester Stallone is alive, I want Rocky to live.
I feel the same way, but I feel like, he was robbed of the Academy Award with his performance in Creed.
Completely.
Don't you feel like if he writes like a really emotional, like kind of heartbreaking death scene for Rocky, that there would be absolutely no way for him to lose out on another Academy Award?
I do not think that Sylvester Stallone would get nominated for another Oscar.
You don't think so?
Dying. I do not. I think, personally, I think the Academy thought he was lucky enough to get that. And I just, part of me figured they never wanted to give him an Oscar, because he was
he won the Golden Globe.
I know he did.
Set.
But you know what though, the Golden Globe, the foreign press, and I venture to say the bulk of like Europe and Asia and whatever, they look fondly on Sly Stallone. His movies always did well there.
Yeah, just getting back to Rocky V, I think Rocky V only made like $40 million.
That was the beginning of the end for Sly. I mean,
and then in worldwide it recovered a little bit, because it ended up making 119 million, and that was because of the worldwide box office, not
exactly
because of the US. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like he might. I mean, if it's written correctly, and obviously we know, Rocky knows the character inside out, and if he has a great scene a great death scene written for him, I think he could really pull it off.
You know what? I think he's got a better shot at winning an Emmy for This Is Us.
Yeah,
on
I was
the
about
Crime
to say
Show.
He's going to be on This Is Us, which is a show that I follow and you don't. But
I do not. But he's throwing his Rocky Jr. Son Milo a bone and appearing on the show. Who's he going to play on the show?
What I read is that he's going to play himself because there's one of the characters is an actor. Because it's a group of siblings, and basically they all share the same birthday. And Justin Hartley plays an actor. I forgot his character's name because it's been a while since I've watched this because it's been on hiatus. But yeah, he has this. He had a really good scene where he was in this really bad sitcom, and he kind of acted out this what everyone thinks of those shows. He had this kind of tantrum, and that scene was performed really well. And then he in that I think in this next season he's going to be doing a film, and he'll be acting. The character will be acting with Sylvester Stallone, and I think what we're supposed to find out what Milo's character is the father, and the story the show takes place in different timelines. So I think they could make some kind of father-son connection between Justin Hartley and Sylvester Stallone. I wouldn't surprise me because you have that connection with because Sylvester Stallone played Milo played Rocky Jr. in the 2006 Rocky Balboa film. Right. So then it might be a somewhat emotional film, and maybe that's Sly kind of practicing for that big emotional moment in Creed 2 where
all right, I guess I don't know. That's I might have to watch that one episode and maybe
I think you should. I mean, we don't know yet, obviously, because they haven't even filmed it yet, but
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's one that I'm going to watch out for. I mean, definitely. Right. But yeah, I mean, getting back to Rocky 5 though, that whole film kind of tainted because it was very difficult for Sylvester Stallone to make that 2006 film. I mean, if you think about it,
without a doubt,
it was a real challenge to get.
I will say this. I think this is my theory. By 2003, Stallone's career was in the toilet. Yeah, I mean, he was making straight to DVD movies. Okay, that movie Detox, I don't even know if you ever saw it.
I never saw that.
It was called Detox, and then I think it was also called ICU. IEYECU. ICU. So his career was done. In fact, that was around the same time he was approached to play Batman in Batman Dead End.
Yes. Yeah, we talked about that.
So these were the dark days. So along comes The Contender on NBC. Okay? That was a reality show every Thursday, I believe, where you had... It was the weirdest show for NBC to be showing because it was really an ESPN show. But you had a bunch of fighters coming in, and they were just fighting each other every week. They lived in a house, and literally it was like the real world with boxers.
Yeah, it was like a Big Brother with boxing.
Exactly. But it was strangely compelling. The fights were sanctioned bouts. They counted on their records. There were some good fights, and I know they were edited for entertainment value, but the result was the result, and they were fighting these guys. But whenever Stallone came on the screen and these guys looked at him, there was a reverence in all of their eyes.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
This was their hero. Okay, and granted, Sugar Ray Leonard was also part of it. He was also a mentor, but seeing Stallone on TV. And I think that film, that TV show, helped him get the ball rolling for the idea. Yes, for the idea. Okay, for Rocky Balboa to be even made.
Yeah, and I guess the reason for that was because he felt like the character needed some kind of redemption. Yeah, for how terribly Rocky V was received.
Mm-hmm. And exactly, and I think if Rocky V hadn't been so dismal, we probably never would have gotten a Rocky Balboa, and to this day, probably not a Creed.
I think that might be true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, good things come from bad things.
Yeah, but at least now we have this Workprint to show that there was a solid, good film in there that just didn't come out. I mean, I guess, you have to wonder, you always wonder with these things, like, what if they had released this Workprint version? Would it have, made... I mean, I think it would have been better received by critics. I don't know if like maybe the mainstream audiences would have connected with it either, because like what happened with what might have happened with the test audiences. Like they tend to when it comes to something somber, when they're expecting something light, they tend to shy away from it. I don't know. I mean, but this Workprint is definitely better. It's
hopefully in one of the commemorative DVD box sets or Blu-ray or 4K, whatever we're calling our DVDs now, the director's cut will be on one of the special feature DVDs. What do you think?
I hope so. I mean,
I
think I have the last one that they put out, which was like the ultimate edition of the Blu-ray. And there's special features for like the first Rocky film, and I'm pretty sure there's special features for Rocky Balboa that maybe I just haven't checked out. But like there's a very like it's very spare for the other sequels, like Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, Rocky 5. They don't really have many special features.
I know there was a special edition DVD of Rocky that came out years ago that had a bunch of stuff on it. A lot of behind-the-scenes footage. I'm wondering if it's Blu-ray. Now I got to go check it out. But there's footage out there. But yeah, so hopefully maybe one day we'll get the Workprint. Jack, I think we said all we probably had to say. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely. It's worth anyone who's a Rocky fan. You owe it to yourself to find this Workprint.
Without a doubt, Jack. Give everyone your Twitter handle.
My Twitter handle is @JackLugo1.
@JackLugo1, and I do want to tell people that we are working on a website. It is taking a little longer than anticipated because, hey, there's only 24 hours in a day, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, everything will be there. All of the social channels and back episodes and all that other stuff. So we will let you know when that is ready. Jack, hopefully we'll be back soon to talk about something, right, Jack? What do you think? Anything new?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that we're checking out. Well, I just started. I've been nudged by my wife and by you and by everyone to start watching Bloodline. So
okay.
I've started, and I'm really captivated by it.
Good. We will go down that Bloodline rabbit hole as soon as you're finished.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I'm sure we'll find something else to talk about in the weeks ahead.
Okay, so Jack, it's been fun again. Always insightful as usual, and I want you to have a great rest of the night and go watch some of those Rocky Balboa outtakes.
All right, I will.
All right, take it easy, Jack.
Take care.
Enjoyed this episode of the Pop Culture Juke Joint? Then don't forget to tip the barkeep by subscribing and reviewing us on iTunes and Stitcher. Also, for some sizzling noir tales, head on over to Amazon to check out Anthony's hard-boiled fiction, available in print, digital, and audiobook formats. On social media, follow Anthony on Twitter @Anthony Venutolo or like his page on Facebook. For everything else, please visit his webpage at www.anthonyvenutolo.com. We'll see you next week.